while that's happening, there's some very interesting themes emerging from both of the discussions, which is really about the whole moralizing of choice in such a way that, as one speaker said, there's that single moment, which if you blow, there is no choice. And similarly, there's only one way that you can really love a child. There's no other possible ways of doing it. I mean, all those hidden messages that are transmitted discursively are very, very important for us to think about, in not just here, but in other sessions later on.
Thanks, Frank. And just in case anyone's worried, I realise there's something slightly excessive looking about having PowerPoint for discussants' comments, but it's really just because I wanted to share a couple of pictures with you. And I am hoping to get through this in a way that doesn't involve Frank needing to show me two fingers towards the end. I'm sure we're all very grateful to our two speakers for providing us with such fantastically rich papers and discussion of breastfeeding. And I think what's come out of this very insightful discussion so far is the idea that discussion of breastfeeding, debates around breastfeeding, is never really just about breastfeeding. I think, as Rebecca has shown us, the way that breastfeeding can function as one of these signal moments that allows us to, or we're told allows us to, evaluate a whole lifetime of motherhood. It's also, I think, clear that breastfeeding and discussion of breastfeeding can function as a focal point for far broader debates. So debates about the appropriate relationship between parents and the state, and the limits of state intervention into the family, and how the state should intervene into the family, which I think takes us back to some of the comments that Frank made this morning. Debates about the intersection of individuals accessing healthcare and social services, and the relationship they have with those who provide those services. So who's the expert in those encounter? And also debates about the nature of men's role in the family. And perhaps this is less immediately obvious, but this is actually what I want to talk about. Stephanie didn't make the point in her presentation today, but she has made it in her published work, that the encouragement of breastfeeding has very obvious implications for the role of men in the provision of care to young children. So if young children can only be fed from the breast, obviously it's only the mother who can do the feeding, and men are excluded from that activity, as are any other carers. And regardless of what Dr. Spock has to say on the subject, if that is the model of infant feeding, then that does also serve to reinforce a model of parenting which relies on the man going out and being the breadwinner and the woman staying at home with the child. If a child needs 10 to 12 feeds per day and can only be fed from the breast, then that's going to be very, very difficult to reconcile with paid work outside the home. Now, what's interesting to me is that highly gendered division of labour has come, it still obviously retains some hold, but has come under serious attack in other contexts of parenting. And not least, it's come under attack from advocates of fathers' rights. And in other areas, I think we've seen significant shifts in what's required of the good father. So the days when the good father was just a remote disciplinarian and a breadwinner, I think, are gone. We expect more of fathers today. And I say this regardless of the actual shifts in caring practices. I think our expectations today are very, very different. So to count as a good father, you will be an involved father, you will be a hands-on father, you will be a father engaged in the kinds of activity that Frank was talking about this morning. So that leaves me with a few questions, really. And the first question I would like to raise is why isn't this issue there influencing debates about breastfeeding? In a context where we have all these policy initiatives seeking to engage men with their children, talking about the importance of men being involved and also being involved with very young babies, is this coming up as an issue in these debates? And if it isn't coming up as an issue in these debates, why isn't it coming up as an issue in these debates? Now, clearly there's biological limitations to how far we can go with a discourse of equality in parenting and with the involvement of men with their children. But in an era of breast pumps and refrigeration, why isn't there a debate about the need for men to bond with their children in this way and to become attached to their children in this way? That debate is happening in a whole range of other areas, other issues to do with fatherhood. Why isn't it happening here? What kinds of assumptions are made in the current debate about infant feeding, about the paternal role, rights and responsibilities of fathers? And why are those kinds of concerns about fatherhood playing out differently here from in some other contexts? Now, I kind of raise that as a question for the speakers, but I've done a very small and limited amount of research into this myself, just in preparation for these comments. And it seems to me on the basis of that reading is that there is a significant literature out there talking about men and breastfeeding, and that's true both on the in terms of the information aimed at new fathers and at the websites dealing with breastfeeding. So the information is there from both sides. But what that information seems to suggest, and the advice that seems to be given, is that men are important, but they're important as helpers and supporters of mothers. And that's a model of fatherhood, again, which has come under very serious challenge elsewhere, where I think we're being told that fathers should have direct, unmediated relationships with their children. So the relationship shouldn't be mediated by the mother. It should be a direct, involved model of fatherhood. So why isn't that happening here? Okay, so this brings me on to the pictures, and this is partly because I thought it would be nice to have some pictures at the end of a long day, but I think there is a serious point here if you bear with me as well. So one of the things I found is that there is actually a company that makes T-shirts for men who want to express their support for breastfeeding, if you've come across these. There's some great ones, but I just wanted to share a couple with you, because I think the politics of this and the politics of how men engage in these issues is kind of interesting. Now, this one I thought was actually quite nice. My baby doesn't like to eat in the bathroom, do you? And you can get this on a variety of different size and different designed T-shirts. This one I think is saying that breastfeeding shouldn't be something that has to happen locked away. Less positively, why wouldn't I want to see more breasts in public? I think is really interesting because it's sold as something supporting women and women's choices, but actually is playing back to some of the very anxieties